Hello, everyone. Welcome to the latest Invasive Mussel Collaborative webinar, Approaches to Watercraft Inspection and Decontamination Programs. My name is Erica Jensen, and I am with the Great Lakes Commission. And on behalf of the Invasive Mussel Collaborative, I want to thank you for participating in today's webinar. For those who are not familiar with the Invasive Mussel Collaborative, it is a group that was convened in 2015 to identify opportunities to advance scientifically sound technology for management and control of invasive dry-seeded mussels in order to produce measurable ecological and economic benefits. If you would like to know more about the collaborative, we encourage you to visit the website at www.invasivemusselcollaborative.net. Today's webinar is part of an ongoing series hosted by the collaborative. The purpose of these webinars is to facilitate learning and information sharing on topics of common interest within the invasive mussel community. It will be recorded and archived along with past and future webinars on the collaborative's website. The focus of today's webinar is voluntary watercraft inspection and decontamination programs. It is a follow-up to an earlier inspection and decontamination webinar hosted this past July, which is available to view on our website. We are pleased to have representatives from Michigan State University Extension, University of Wisconsin Extension, New York Sea Grant, Wildlife Forever, and CD3 joining us today to share their experiences with these programs. For those of you that have participated in our previous webinars, you will notice that we have switched our webinar services to Skype. And while we always strive to minimize technological issues during these webinars, we apologize for any that may arise due to this transition. And with that in mind, I'd like to cover a few logistical items before we get to today's presentation. Audio for the webinar is automatically streamed through your computer speakers once you join the Skype event. You also have the option to dial into the webinar using a telephone, and to change your audio to a phone line, select Switch Audio to My Phone from the banner at the bottom of the screen and click Connect from the pop-up screen. A second pop-up screen will list the number to call into, as well as the conference ID to connect to the webinar. In order to minimize the potential for interruptions and background noise, we ask that all attendees remain on mute, both through your computer and on your phone if you're joining via phone. We will do our best to try to automatically mute everyone, but we could use your assistance to make sure that your phone lines are muted so that we don't get any background noise. We encourage and will accept written questions from attendees during the webinar. If you have a question, you may type it into the chat box signified by the chat bubble icon in the lower left-hand corner of the webinar screen. Questions may be submitted at any time during the webinar, and depending on time, we may answer one or two questions following each presentation, but the majority of questions will be addressed after all the presentations have been given. We will do our best to take all questions and comments during the webinar, and if you need to leave before we have gotten to your question, we encourage you to review the webinar recording that will be posted on the website to hear the question and the answer. If you're experiencing technical difficulties, you can send a message through the chat box and we will do our best to help you. To view presentations in a full screen format, you will need to change your screen layout to Content View. And to do this, you can select the layout icon in the upper right corner of your screen, indicated by the red circle on the slide that's being shown, and choose Presentation View or Content View. So with that, we will get to our first presenter of today. Our first presenter is Brittany Roger. Brittany has been working with New York Sea Grant since 2013. She works with watercraft inspection program partners around the state of New York, standardizing efforts and coordinating partnership opportunities for programs by providing trainings, workshops, and webinars, as well as program resources. She is also pursuing her master's degree at SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry, working with the IMAP Invasive team to create a certified trainers network to help serve the needs of the invasive species network by training and retraining instructors across the state. So with that, Brittany, we will hand off presenter status to you and get your line unmuted, and you should be ready to go.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. All right, so thank you everybody again for joining. And so just to give you a quick outline of what I'm going to talk about, I'll introduce you to New York Sea Grant for those of you around the area who might not be familiar with the Sea Grant programs, especially New York. A little bit about our activities in New York State around aquatic invasive species, and then get into some of the different programs and opportunities that we have around New York as a whole. Okay, so New York Sea Grant was founded in 1971, and it's a statewide network of integrated research, education, and extension services. And so we have people located around the state, and that includes on the western end of New York, in the Lake Erie and western part of Lake Ontario region. We have some of us, like myself, I'm in Newark, hosted at the Wayne County Cooperative Extension, kind of in the central region of New York, but we also cover much of the Great Lakes coastlines. We have a couple people in Oswego on the eastern end of Lake Ontario. We also have staff in Ithaca, and then down in the New York City and Long Island region, as well as the Hudson. So we basically cover a majority of the state, and there is a little bit of a gap up in the northern region of the state, but our neighbors at Lake Champlain Sea Grant, they cover that part. So we basically have all of New York covered with Sea Grant work. And so New York is a little bit unique among some of the other programs. So we do have over 7,600 freshwater lakes, and that adds up to 3,400 miles of varied coastline. But we are also the only state in the nation that borders both the Great Lakes and the ocean. And so we have a little bit of a different approach to much of the way that we have to manage invasive species and work with different partners. And so as you can see on the map on the PowerPoint, we have multiple different watersheds and different connections to all the different areas. So our western end, we do have Lake Erie, and then Lake Ontario, and then all of our interior lakes within the state as well. And so it's said that within the 20 million people that live in New York, 85% of those live within the coastal regions, including these inner freshwater lakes. And so all of these ports along the coastline and the canal systems and the rivers are playing a really important role for our marinas and our trade, but then also our tourism and recreation, and the contribution that they have to the economic and environmental sustainability as well. So just a brief history of aquatic invasive species, or just invasive species activities around the state as a whole. So in 2003, New York State created the Invasive Species Task Force. In 2005, the Partnerships for Regional Invasive Species Management were created, and so these are to help prevent and minimize the harm caused by invasive species in New York. And so they're intended to coordinate the efforts of managing the functions of invasive species, and also coordinating partnership efforts and recruiting and training volunteers around the state as a whole. And so just a couple other things to highlight. So in 2007, we do have an Invasive Species Advisory Committee, the New York State Invasive Species Research Institute, and then the IMAP Invasive Program, which is to map any invasive species locations, and that information is then pushed on to help with management efforts and awareness of where species are spreading. Two major funding years that you'll understand why they're so important. In 2012, there was a huge increase of Great Lakes Restoration Initiative funding in New York for watercraft inspection programming and invasive species efforts. And as well as in 2016, there was the Aquatic Invasive Species Spread Prevention Program, which was administered by New York State DEC. So this map, I'm going to scroll through a couple different images just to try to make people a little bit more aware of what watercraft inspection looks like in New York, and then I'll kind of get into the different programs that we have around the state and a little bit why we're different than some of the other states. And so this was the initial watercraft inspection programming started in the Adirondack region, and it kind of moved westward. So as I scroll through, So you see a little bit of an expansion through the Adirondack parks, and then also a little bit more south. And then this year was the big year. This is when we actually expanded to the Finger Lakes and reached the Great Lakes region. And so there are multiple different programs that actually have these launches. And so each of these dots are a launch where a steward was located on a different water body or a lake within the state. So again, another big expansion. And then even further, so now at this point we have the western end of New York covered through Lake Ontario and Lake Erie, and then also in the Finger Lakes, and we've expanded to a little bit more of the smaller lakes that didn't have coverage before. And so this is an even bigger extent of coverage. And then, so this is not including all of the stewards, but as you can see with this map, even including these black locations, this is a pretty good coverage around New York State, and we still have so many public launches that aren't covered, and there's also private launches where there are no stewards being there. So most of these launches include DEC, state parks, or public launches that are owned by different entities. So a little bit more about watercraft inspection programs in New York State. And so there are, as of 2017, we had over 200, almost 200 watercraft inspection stewards around the state. And so our programs are not ran by one entity, but they're operated by so many different partners around the state and organizations as well. And so we are getting a mass amount of inspections done. And so the stewards are out at the launches conducting voluntary inspections. And so in 2016, we had 120,000, just to kind of give a little bit of a perception of how much they're actually doing. And so these range, the stewards that are out there, the nearly 200 people, are ranged from high schoolers, or while they're in school still, or college-age students. But then we also have throughout all the ages, all the way up to people who are retired and just really care about their lakes that their lake associations are associated with. There are boat washing stations around the state, and there are also multiple decontamination units around the state, and I know that this is a little bit newer around New York, and so over the past couple of years, we've really started to see these decontamination units get put out there, and so these ones are doing the high pressure, hot water decontaminations of boats where they find the invasive species. Just a highlight of the importance for the programs in New York State. So this year alone, there was a boat that came in from out of state to, they were at a launch trying to get into the water, and one of the stewards stopped them to do the inspection. They agreed, and they actually found hydrilla, a large piece of hydrilla plant on the boat. And so that was a huge indicator that the stewards that are out there and the efforts that are out there this is why they're so important, is that they're making the awareness, they're spreading the awareness and finding these species. So funding for the program, so on average in New York, one steward costs upwards of $6,000 per season, and some programs are showing a cost of almost $10 per boat that's inspected. And so these are mostly for the launches that have a little bit fewer of the boats that are coming in and out, so they're not getting as high of numbers, but it just goes to show how important and essential funding is around New York State. In 2016, the state actually put forth an effort of $2.1 million from the New York State Environmental Protection Fund, and that funded 24 different projects. And so these projects included watercraft inspection-related information. And so that was either decontamination units being put into, installed, and as well. And so some of the big federal grants that have definitely helped with watercraft inspection in New York is the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, and the state grants, again, that DEC has administered that program. But then also the collaborations with the multiple partnerships around the states. And so we have municipalities and lake associations that are very passionate about their water bodies located in their regions. And so they actually set aside funding for stewards and help with some of the costs of the program. So some of the regulatory efforts that also help with the programming around the state is there is an effort for signs of clean, drain, dry, or clean, drain, treat in New York State that have to be at all public boat launches so that there's the awareness. Whether there's a steward there or not, people are seeing that information. But then also the Part 576 and then the other two with DEC and Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, saying that if boats are launching or retrieving their watercraft, they have to take spread prevention methods. And so that's the Clean, Drain, Dry is the campaign, but in New York we are saying Clean, Drain, Treat, and so that includes drying and rinsing. Okay, so now I want to touch base on some of the programs around the state. And so the Adirondack Watershed Institute is kind of the big program. So they have over 119 stewards in 2017 covering 62 different launches. And so many of these launches are just public water bodies. And if you look at the map in the lower left-hand side, you can kind of see the huge range that they cover. And so there are 16 decontamination stations around the Adirondack region, and so people from the public can actually go to those, get their boat washed. There's signs that say like free boat washing station. They get their boats cleaned so that they're not transporting. The photo in the middle is actually hydrilla, and so that is the hydrilla plant that was found on one of the boats that had came from out of state. And just another effort that applaud is for that hand you see that's actually covered in zebra mussels, and those were found on a boat that was viewed as clean, but luckily the steward kind of took a deeper look into it and actually found some of these. And so on the right-hand side, you can see this huge list of funding. And so there are multiple different agencies and organizations that partner for this. And so Paul Smith College and the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, as well as DEC funding, those are, the huge funders. But then also there's a list that you can see of the towns and the different lake associations that also provide funding for each of these programs. So another one to touch base on is the Finger Lakes Institute. So again, just catch your attention to that map in the lower left that kind of shows the region, the approximate region that they cover. And so they had 24 stewards in 2017, and this is their 6th season up and running. And they also have 17 different launches that they cover around the area. And so the Finger Lakes Institute definitely puts in a lot of effort because there are so many public launches around the Finger Lakes. And if anybody hasn't ever been to New York and is interested in the Finger Lakes, they are just beautiful lakes with so much opportunity around them and huge tourism draws. So people come from all over for the Finger Lakes as well as the Adirondack region. And so the New York State Parks is another one to cover. And so if you look down at the lower left map, it looks a little bit distorted, so it's not just a small circle. And so this program is unique is that it covers launches all the way up from the St. Lawrence down around New York State through Lake Ontario and into Erie on the western end. But they also have launch coverage in the Finger Lakes in the northern and southern parts of the Adirondack region. And so they have 2 decontamination stations, which are actually newer stations, and all of their funding comes through the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. And so they've been up and running for a few years as well. And they hopefully will be continuing to expand further in the future and to get those newer launches that haven't been covered in the past. Okay, so then this is just to show the variety. So again, the Adirondack Watershed Institute, those stewards, there were 119 stewards for that program. This program I'm highlighting is the Hudson River Sloop Clearwater. And so this year they had 5 stewards total and they covered 9 launches. So in reference to the Adirondacks, they had 119 stewards and over 60 launches. But then if you switch to this, there's twice as many launches as stewards. And so this program, they have expanded from much of the Hudson kind of reaching up to the Capital District, headed that direction at least. And so in the Hudson River, there is hydrilla, which is one of the biggest concerns in that region. And so they do a lot of efforts to reach the public and just kind of raise the awareness out in that area. And so part of the issues in New York is that there are multiple different programs around the state. And so this is the Lake George Park Commission. And so they actually have mandatory inspections. So the rest are voluntary. So if people don't want to talk to the stewards, they don't need to. They just do it because they understand what the stewards are for, and it only takes them a couple minutes. So for the Lake George Park Commission, it's a little bit different in the fact that they are mandatory, and they actually put these labels or seals on the boats so that when a boat gets inspected or decontaminated, if it needs to be, they put the seal on there, and then they can go to whatever launch they need to and launch into the water. And so this is a separate program from the other ones in the state. They do have New York State Environmental Protection Fund funding, but then they also include funding from local partnerships and municipalities around the state, around the lake as well. So just kind of reaching some of the huge programs, smaller programs, and then we do have the mandatory part, which is in the western region of the state on Lake George. And so all of the programs around the state have adopted the same messaging. So they adopted the National Stop Aquatic Hitchhikers campaign and also the Clean, Drain, Dry messaging. And so that really helps standardize the program so that when people do see a steward, whether they're traveling, wherever they're traveling in the state, they know exactly what the steward is there for. Also the images, so the boat launching into the water, the stop sign, all of that information really helps awareness and gets the program to be more effective. And so then some of the resources around New York that are open to the public, to anybody around. So we actually did write a Watercraft Inspection Steward Program Handbook, which is a guide for any newer programs or even older programs to refer to. And so this is everything that you would need to know to start a program, how to write the letters to get permission to be at launches, and there's information on trainings, all sorts of stuff in this handbook. And so then there's also standardized training and assistance that New York Sea Grant and the Finger Lakes Institute or Hobart William Smith colleges, they provide for the state, as well as the Adirondack Watershed Institute. And so this includes steward training, program coordinator training and assistance, and creating resources for those programs. This year, I just wanted to highlight something a little bit different. And so this year was the first year that we're trying to get the programs on the same page. So we all have a standard set of questions that all the programs have used and asked. And so that's been kind of compiled into this Survey 123, which is part of ArcGIS. And that's being used, it was piloted around the state this year. And so we're kind of looking for what's going to happen in 2018 and see if we can expand the coverage, get a couple more programs involved in that, and see what we can do. And a big part of that was through the loaning of electronic devices from different organizations, including DEC, New York Natural Heritage Program, New York Sea Grant, and there's others who loaned out these electronic devices to collect the data, which can now be compiled into one system and then can be used by the rest of the state, and to kind of look at where boats are coming from, where they're going, and if there's invasive species on them and what species are being found. There's also tools and resources that have been developed that are open for the public to use, as well as recorded webinar series and different opportunities on New York Sea Grant's website as well. So with that, I'm going to let everybody else kind of take their spot on the floor, and then we'll be doing questions at the end. So if you want to take back over, I'm all set. Thank you guys so much for listening.
Thank you, Brittany. We did get a couple of questions for you in the chat box, which you can take a look at, but we will be addressing them at the end after the other presenters have gone. Our next presenter is Joe Latimore. Dr. Latimore is an aquatic ecologist and outreach specialist in the Department of Fisheries and Wildlife at Michigan State University. Her work focuses on volunteer monitoring of Michigan streams and lakes, community-based approaches to watershed management, natural resources leadership development, and science communication, with a broad emphasis on aquatic invasive species. Joe is the director of the Michigan Lake and Stream Leaders Institute, facilitator of the Michigan Inland Lakes Partnership, and provides technical support to the MyCore Cooperative Lakes Monitoring Program. She has a bachelor's in biology from Albion College and a master's in biological sciences from the University of Notre Dame, and a PhD in fisheries and wildlife from Michigan State. So with that, Joe, you should be all set to present, and hopefully we have you off mute and you can go ahead. You may have to hit *6, or you should be good now.
Looks like I'm good. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So thanks everybody, and thanks Brittany for kicking us off. I'm going to just spend a little time talking about some of the work we're doing in Michigan with voluntary boat decontamination. So what we're looking at here is a program that is completely voluntary. Michigan does not have any mandatory boat inspection programs. And what we had learned through research prior to the beginning of this program is similar to what we've seen in other states. Boaters tend to be aware of aquatic invasive species. They're not necessarily sure what they can do to stop them. And so we knew that we had some good passive outreach underway in Michigan. Passive meaning we had a lot of signs out, and we had billboards, advertisements in fishing magazines, things like that. Brochures, displays, but we weren't doing a great job of talking to people about boat cleaning. We weren't talking to people and demonstrating decontamination. We wanted to do more active outreach where we were demonstrating those good practices, answering any questions people had, and showing people how they're part of a larger effort. That, if they're washing their boat and the next guy washes his boat, and if we're all washing our boats, we may be able to make a difference. So, these are really framed as demonstrations, not necessarily inspections. We didn't have the authority to do inspections. And so we're out there trying to demonstrate best practices. We do in Michigan, I'll just add as a side note, we do have a Clean Boats, Clean Waters program. That's one of these programs focused on training volunteers to do demonstrations and inspections. But that's not what I'm going to be talking about today. Today, I'm going to be talking about our mobile boat wash program. So this conversation went on with our partners about what we could do to do more active outreach. So we talked with partners at the U.S. Forest Service, particularly the Huron-Manistee National Forest, and also at the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality. And we agreed that a mobile boat wash outreach program was our logical next step for active outreach. And we all had something to bring to the table. The Forest Service had some money from Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. The DEQ had equipment. They had a mobile boat wash station, a decontamination station. And we at MSU, we had students looking for experience with natural resources outreach and looking for summer jobs. And we all could contribute knowledge and expertise in addressing aquatic invasive species issues. And so this partnership developed for Michigan's mobile boat wash program. So the model that we're following, first, it requires these mobile boat wash units. So if you have not seen one, here's an example. This is one of the actual units that we use. There's several manufacturers of these pressure washers, but this is the one we've chosen to use. They cost us, for a model of this size, about $20,000. So it's a substantial investment. And basically what you have here is a pressure washer that generates hot water. So there is a gas powered generator that runs the pressure washer, and also a diesel burner that heats the water to about 140 degrees Fahrenheit. While the unit does have the capacity to include soap or chemical additive, we do not use that. We only use hot water under pressure. There is a clean water tank that holds the wash water. There's also a vacuum infiltration system. So we're able to capture all the wash water and vacuum it up into a recovery tank. So we're a self-contained kind of unit. We recover all of the water and are able to transport it off site, so we don't have to worry about either invasive species or other organisms that are coming off the boats or trailers we're washing. Also, we're concerned about containing any kind of metals or oils, boat fuel, things like that come off. So we're able to control all of that through this unit. You can see some photos here of the unit in operation with some of our seasonal staff running it. First, I'd draw your attention to the containment mat. You'll see in all those photos, the boats we're washing are on a containment mat. So that's where all the wash water and any debris or materials that come off the the boats we're washing end up. And we're able to, the lower right corner shows the vacuum attachment that we're able to take in that water, transport it off site. We actually do dispose of all of the wash water through the sanitary sewer system, that we don't do ground disposal of that water just because of the possibility of chemical contaminants like fuels, oils, paints, metals, things like that. So it's a completely self-contained program. We have a number of attachments that we use. Typically, we're using the spray wand, just like you would use at the car wash. But there's also attachments like the one in the upper right that allow you to reach underneath the trailer, underneath the boats, to spray down where it might be difficult to reach by hand. So that's kind of the equipment that's involved. The next part is actually involving our seasonal staff. And again, being associated with the university, we're able to advertise for student employees. And so we engage students from Michigan State, but also other universities and colleges across Michigan. It's a really great opportunity for these students to obtain experience in communicating with the public about natural resource issues, and also to know what it's like to deal with the public that isn't always excited to be interrupted when they're out for a day of boating or fishing. But we found that overall people are very receptive and interested. And so they learn how to demonstrate these cleaning, draining, and drying techniques, and also explain to boaters how they can do these good practices even when there's not a handy mobile boat wash there or a permanent boat wash station at the areas that they're visiting. The students get a lot of good experience because not only are we out there doing the boat washing, we typically, depending on the space, are able to set up a tent or table with information to draw their attention and get their interests covered for sure. We also find that the students get experience working with media of different types. Often having a mobile boat wash event in a community, especially a small community, is kind of big news. So we work with the local media and provide radio interviews, television interviews. Often we're featured in the local newspaper, and so all of these photos are from different media highlights and stories that came out about our program. And so this is not only a great experience for our students, but it's also a way for us to expand our reach. So not only are we talking to boaters that actually showed up that day, but people are catching the stories in their local newspapers, radio, and TV, which is expanding our message of clean, drain, and dry and aquatic invasive species. Social media is also another area that we focus on. We highlight those events. The students have some fun with that. We did a tour of the Upper Peninsula, traveling around, doing a number of events with local partners up there. And the students dubbed Operation UP, and it actually got a pretty good following on social media, which we got a kick out of, but we're also excited to see that many people that were interested in the work that we were doing. And then finally, working with local partners is a huge part of our efforts. We couldn't do what we do without teaming up with local partners. And there's a number of reasons. First of all, we're able to offer this service and host these events at no charge to local partners because of our funding source. But there's a lot that we wouldn't be able to do or wouldn't be able to do well if we didn't have local partners that we work with. So we're working with groups like lake associations, conservation districts based at the county level here in Michigan, our state agencies, our federal agencies, our cooperative invasive species management areas, which are similar to CWMAs in other states. A lot of different groups are interested and concerned about invasive species and looking to find out what can we do to protect our lake, protect our river from invasive species, and to show people what these simple things they can do. So the benefits to us is that they really bring a local perspective to any boat washing event that we're hosting. They know that water body. They know what fish are there. They know what invasive species are there. They can answer local questions. And they also show a local buy-in to invasive species prevention. That is not just, we're not up in the Upper Peninsula trying to tell people, hey, we're from MSU and you need to do this. It's better if we have some local folks there with us that say, hey, we're from this lake and we hope you'll join us in protecting our lake from aquatic invasive species. So it really helps us with kind of convincing the boaters to agree to a demonstration and a boat wash. And then finally, they also help handle the local logistics, finding the best locations for setting up, getting the word out prior, connecting us with local media, and coordinating volunteers to help with the various events. So we started this program back in 2014. It's a 5-year agreement with the U.S. Forest Service. So we just finished our 4th season out of 5. And so far, we've done quite a lot. We've had 180 events across Michigan over those 4 seasons, and those seasons usually run from about June 1 to mid-August. So just kind of during the peak of the boating season. A lot of conversations with boaters and other interested people. We've washed about 1,200 boats, and over 4 years, that might not seem like a lot, but you have to remember that with some of our events, we'll go and spend a whole day and 3 boats will show up. And if we get half of them to agree to a wash, then that's the number we get. But we're still there and we're still being covered. And so the boat wash number isn't the only thing we're looking for. Again, this isn't a mandatory thing. This is voluntary and it's a demonstration. And we get about 45% acceptance rate. And that's an interesting point for us is recognizing that only about half of the people we talk to are interested in getting a boat wash. Which is interesting because we also hear sometimes from boaters that say, why isn't this mandatory? Everybody should be doing it. Maybe if it was mandatory, more people would do it. But at this point, it's more of a demonstration kind of project. And I know there is a question in the chat box about, specific decontamination for motors and impellers and live wells and things like that. And, honestly, because of liability, we don't get inside people's motors and do those kinds of things. Certainly, we have attachments where we could do it, but we choose not to simply because that could open us up to some problems, especially when we're traveling all over the state. We've had over 1,500 volunteer hours contributed in this program, and our social media has really taken off as well. So the message is getting out there and building on these face-to-face events that we're doing. Here's just a quick map that shows the locations around the state of Michigan where we have hosted our events. We get all over. It's important to mention that we do have some more local mobile boat wash programs in the state, most of which are connected to the U.S. Forest Service. They've been very supportive of these kind of programs. And so those, for example, in the western part of the Upper Peninsula, you'll see we don't have any events over there. That's because there's a local program there that cover those events. And there's some other gaps in Michigan that are filled by other local programs. But if local programs can't do it, we're on the job. So, we don't just stick around Lansing. We cover the whole state from north to south and east to west. Now we have discovered, there's been a few other successes I wanted to mention right away. I've already mentioned the partnerships that we're really excited about. It's incredible at the end of the season when we kind of list our thank yous or our credits, the number of organizations that we're able to partner with. And when we first started this program in 2014, we had to work hard to spread the word about our program and to get people, other groups engaged with us. Now they're seeking us out. Already we're getting requests for events for next year, which is great. Some other successes that we found is that we're putting ourselves out of business in a few places. More and more communities are talking about putting in permanent boat wash stations. And, they bring us out to build local support for a permanent boat wash station. And so there's a few places we went in 2014 and 2015 that don't want us back anymore because they've installed a permanent station. They don't need us anymore. And we think that's a success. And then finally, we have support of other mobile boat wash programs. I mentioned that there's a few regional programs out there. And we help them from everything that we've learned over the years. As those programs come online, we can share with them things that we've learned. So that's an excellent success that we've found too. And then finally, a few opportunities, some things that challenges we've met or are still figuring out. Staff training, of course, is super important. And of course, we train the seasonal staff on aquatic invasive species, outreach techniques, and so forth. But of course, hauling a big trailer and driving a big truck is not a skill that every seasonal has when they come in. So we've definitely developed a training program on trailering and safety. And we've also added harassment training. Unfortunately, that's a reality of the work that we do. When we have students traveling around the state, some boaters are maybe a little, their behavior may not be as admirable as we would like. And so we've had cases of sexual harassment just about every year, but we train our students to deal with that too. It's never escalated into anything problematic beyond a few comments and that kind of thing, but it's important and it's something to think about. We do experience that occasionally, and we have found it really valuable to add training on how to manage those situations safely. Signage opportunities have been huge. We always note whether a boat launch has aquatic invasive species signage. They're supposed to, but they don't always. And so there was one region of the state that we discovered somehow had been missed completely by our DNR by putting their signs up. So we were able to deliver a load of 75 signs to get all those access sites signed this summer, which was a big success. We've had some interesting opportunities with cooperation from agency staff. Our local and county agencies are super cooperative. For example, the county Marine Patrol shows up when we happen to be doing an event. They'll pretty much always stop and work with us and let us wash their boat. When state agencies show up and when tribal agencies show up, they usually don't want to talk with us. They have a lot going on, they're in a hurry, and typically don't stop. So we would love to have more cooperation from agency staff on the state and tribal level because I think they can really model best practices. And then finally, we do plan to develop a guidance manual for those, for other organizations that might be interested in hosting or running a mobile boat wash program like ours to kind of share the lessons that we have learned. We currently run, we own now 2 of these boat washing units, trailer units. So we have, so we hire 4 seasonals each year. So we have 2 staff in 1 unit, so we can be in 2 places at once. And that's the current size of our program. So with that, I don't want to take up any more time, throw my contact information back up there, and look forward to hearing from the remaining speakers. Thanks.
Thanks, Joe. And we are getting more questions typed in, which we will hold to the end since we want to make sure we give all of our presenters a chance. So our next presenters are Ed Rudberg and Pat Conzemius. Dr. Rudberg is a partner at CD3. As the 3rd generation of his family in the boating industry, he has a passion for recreation and conservation. He has a PhD in natural resources science and management, which blended communication and psychological theory to catalyze individuals' adoption of conservation behaviors on lakes. As an entrepreneur of over a decade, he has developed numerous conservation-focused products, which grew to national distribution. He is formally trained in qualitative and quantitative research methodologies, project management, and various behavioral metrics. He is an avid angler, bow fisherman, hunter, and boater. And joining him is Pat Conzemius. He is the Conservation Director for Wildlife Forever and leads the National Clean, Drain, Dry initiative. Through innovative marketing and grassroots community engagement, Pat has helped Wildlife Forever become a leader in invasive species prevention, outreach, and education. Using a partnership approach and collaborative networking process, Wildlife Forever leverages multiple services and resources for consistent invasive species prevention. So welcome, Pat and Ed. Your presentation should be up, and hopefully we are getting you unmuted.
Can you hear me, Erica?
Yes, we can.
Good. Well, thanks everybody for the opportunity to talk with you today about how Wildlife Forever, our partners through the Clean, Drain, Dry initiative and National Outreach Program, work to integrate outreach and education into inspection and decon programs. Some of the previous presenters did a wonderful job at showcasing some of the opportunities for how to do that. And through our presentation, or my presentation today, I'm going to give you specific examples of some of the resources that we have readily available for you to help augment your inspection and decon programs. So the Clean, Drain, Dry initiative was started several years ago to really build a partnership approach around consistent AIS messaging. And we provide innovative marketing tools and outreach to really empower that action at the access and that user-led action of Clean, Drain, and Dry. Many people are familiar with different brands like McDonald's and Philip Morris and cigarettes. And so we take invasive species prevention to a level that integrates marketing and branding. And so we're branding the message of clean, drain, and dry, much like you would see how McDonald's brands hamburgers and creates these iconic brands that have changed and influenced behavior, positive or negative, for our country for hundreds of years. Philip Morris did a wonderful job back in the 50s of communicating how great cigarettes are and how they're throat tested. And we all know today how detrimental they are for everyone's health. But all through branding, people are aware of those products. And we take that opportunity to influence behavior by marketing and advertising clean, drain, dry message. So how do we do that? Well, we partner with many of the presenters that earlier spoke, as well as several of the folks already attending and listening to this webinar. But we work with lake associations, clubs, counties, states, federal agencies, universities, corporations, and foundations. And we do that by providing a lot of grassroots, community-based type of outreach, providing full-service media, anywhere from billboard advertising, print advertising, and a whole array of services to help streamline efforts to do outreach and education that supports the messaging and the actions that you're implementing at the access. And so we do that through products and resources, all again around that consistent clean, drain, dry message. That's the take-home. That's what we want people to remember, and that's what we want them to do. So a lot of our programs and tools are very targeted. We're targeting our outreach to boaters and anglers. We're targeting it to watercraft recreational users, and we do that through multiple touch points. We use highway billboards, print ads, television media, as well as handouts and signage. Signage not only through posters and some of the things that you might see at a restroom, but signage at the access. And we also do quite a bit of social media on our Clean, Drain, Dry Facebook page. So I encourage you all to follow and like that for updates about our program. And one of the advantages of using media of this type is you really generate a low cost per impression. We call that CPM, cost per thousand. And when we're evaluating the cost of our programs, outreach and education is definitely something we need to consider because it reaches so many people for so few dollars. I'm just going to give you some of the examples of some of the graphics that we utilize. Again, here's a billboard where we're targeting that watercraft recreational user, that pleasure boater, that skier. Again, a nice positive message with that take-home being clean, drain, dry. That's the action. That's what we want people to do. And so we promote that first and foremost in how we present our materials. Again, we list partners at the bottom of most of our graphics to really reiterate that this is a collaborative. It's really a network partnership that makes this work with funding from a variety of partners. One of the newer tools that we've developed this past year are vehicle wraps and boat wraps. And here's an example of how we've taken the message to basically a mobile billboard. And those folks that have decon units that are trailering those mobile decon units, this is exactly what we did here in Itasca County. The county came to us and said, we've got a trailer vehicle that's going to be hauling a decon unit. They used it as an opportunity to get that message out throughout the community, and so we developed this neat vehicle wrap. And again, these are resources that we can help you design and procure. Another way to really drive home that message where you want folks to remember how to clean, drain, dry at the access is through print ads. And it's a simple way, it's a very cost-effective way to get the message in front of your audience. Again, very targeted based on the publication that you choose. But again, we have those partnerships and those relationships in-house ready to go. And so if this is something that's of value or where we can help you with, let us know how to do that. We've got the graphics already designed, and we can help with those with that outreach. Some other examples of the type of print media that we do through a variety of publications, primarily targeted to the western states. But again, targeted in that we're targeting specific users. We got fly anglers, spin cast anglers, but also those hikers and those recreationists that use ATVs, and that might be a hunter, or that might be just somebody who likes to trail ride using an ATV. But again, that clean, drain, dry reiterates that message on multiple touch points. We also do indoor signage and displays. This is an example of a display that we did at the International Airport here in Minneapolis. And again, it reaches a lot of eyeballs, millions of impressions a year by simply putting the message in front of a high volume traffic area. Again, it's a little less targeted in that anyone that passes by sees the message, but again, you're reaching a large volume of impressions and people passing by. A few more examples of the type of outreach tools that we provide. Icebox wraps, again, a neat clean message, positive, and in a place where people are going to stop by and see it. Gas stations, people grab ice for their afternoon activities. It's a great medium to get that message out there. And also boat ramp signage. Through some great work done by Minnesota Sea Grant and some of the other Sea Grant states, we know that signage at accesses are the #1 ways people get their information about invasive species. So we created new, fresh designs that reiterate what we want folks to remember, that brand, clean, drain, dry, and created new signage, very positive, appealing, colorful. And these signs also incorporate our new Clean, Drain, Dry app, where if they scan the sign with our app, a video plays right on their phone, much like Pokemon Go. So it's another way, it's another medium to get the message in front of folks. Another tool that's been very, very popular and used fairly extensively is geofencing. And how it works is it's an advertisement that pops up on a mobile device user cell phone when they enter a geographical ring. So we've had many occasions here in Minnesota where we're targeting a specific access point. We can set a geographical boundary, maybe a mile, maybe a half a mile boundary around that access, where if anybody's on their cell phone and they're coming to that access, this pop-up ad displays on their phone. And it's also another engagement tool where they can select that, hit that ad, and go for more additional information. And that's the pop-up screen and the mobile web page that pops up on the right-hand side of your screen where they can learn more information, and there's videos and other educational opportunities. Oh, back one more. So here are some signage that we helped develop for some of our partners. Again, reiterating that clean, drain, dry message using clean, bright, colorful graphics and very pointed message for that action that we want folks to take. One of our newest opportunities and partnerships that we're developing here at Wildlife Forever is with our partners Ed and Mark Applebacher through the CD3 Watercraft Cleaning Station. And this is a very innovative tool, device that's built right at the boat ramp, right at the access for user-led AIS prevention. So there's no need for trained watercraft inspectors. The station is permanent, and it provides all the necessary tools and educational messaging for people to do the right thing and to take those actions of clean, drain, and dry. By simply providing tools, we know and have seen, and Ed will get into this later in his presentation, we know folks are utilizing the tools to take that action. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ed Rudberg from CD3. But again, we're here to help. Let's work together. This coming winter, we'll be unveiling a new product and services catalog. So feel free to reach us at Wildlife Forever. You can go to cleandraindry.org or also find us on Facebook at the Clean Drain Dry Initiative. So with that, thank you very much.
Thanks much, Pat. As I have gone through my work and career, I call changing behavior a bit of a unicorn. Working at state agencies and nonprofits, that was often our goal, is to change behavior at that individual level to push conservation. So how do we get boaters then to execute the behaviors that Pat is queuing them up for, and you all are queuing them up for with that clean, drain, dry message. So I'll talk a little bit about the pilot that we ran this summer here in Minnesota, and talk about how we execute, those BMPs. So this is essentially my PhD distilled down to one slide here, but we're getting a lot of messaging for cleaning, draining, and drying. There's different state messages, and what that tends to do is cue up boaters' behavior or a plan to act to do those behaviors that we're asking them to do. The issue is that, and what Joe noted, was that there's often not the behavior taking place, and that's for many reasons, whether it be too difficult, they don't know what to do, etc. So how do we get then over those behavioral barriers? Well, there's barriers to adoption in many of the different approaches that we're taking so far to combat AIS. One, on the pressure washer side, there's a high cost, it needs to be staffed, and you must have a water catchment. In addition, with staff inspections, there's ongoing costs. It's often difficult to recruit or manage staff. Alternatively, you have boat landings that do not have any resources. So at those, you just have lack of light, you may not be able to reach onto your boat, and just more generally, you don't have the tools to execute those BMPs that we're asking folks to do. So what we are looking to do in partnership with Wildlife Forever is really empower people to take the actions themselves. If you had someone over to your home, you would hope that they wouldn't walk through your living room with muddy boots. So what do? You give them a mat at your front door so they can clean their boots off. We're really trying to be that doormat at the water's edge, welcoming people in and out of those water resources. So our process was an iterative design. We had many stakeholders, which we included not only in Minnesota but nationally, which we were able to then to start off with this design, which admittedly was a little militant. It was largely a big garbage can, and really worked from that to our current design. And the current design is what Pat showed you before. It has a series of different tools specifically made to execute cleaning, draining, and drying. So the wet dry vac, so you can dry out engine compartments, suck up any debris, etc., that might be in the boat. Blower to dry off any areas, dry out your lines, etc. A drain plug wrench, a marine brush, a reach tool so people don't have to get on their hands and knees and get under the boat. On top of having marine LED lights that show underneath the boat and then within the boat for low light conditions. One of the things that we have done is we really have a goal of making a smart machine. I'm a bit of a data dork, and so my issue has always been with education and outreach. Unlike marketing for, say, McDonald's, they can correlate their marketing spend with increases in sales. On the private or on the public side of things, when we're looking to change people's behavior for conservation, we often do not have the tools to actually measure those best management practices being executed, outside of putting someone out and watching people. So this tool is what's called IoT, Internet of Things Connected, which means we have sensors on every button, every tool, the lights. So whenever we have a use, that data is collected, pushed to the cloud, and allows resource managers then to start following and correlate their education and outreach with actual best management practices taking place. So this picture shows Bryant Lake, and it is a suburban lake. The launch is owned by a park district. You can see it was above curb. It was a retrofit, so it wasn't made specifically to have a cleaning station there, and really is focused on cleaning out. So to date, our cloud services show us that we have had over 3,800 total BMPs taking place. The top uses being at the brush, the reach tool, and surprisingly the wrench. Another pilot location is outside of Duluth, Minnesota, so a more rural location. It is not above the curb, so we have pylons in there, and it allows for cleaning in and cleaning out. Again, it's a retrofit. The location is municipality owned. It's not as, because it's not a suburban lake, it has a little less uses at 885, with the vacuum, the brush, and the wrench being the top tools used. On Lake Minnetonka here in Minnesota, we have another station that's gone out that is piloting our solar technology for off-the-grid use. This is a highly suburban area and likely, a very, very busy launch. What we've found, it's again street height, it's a retrofit, you can clean it in or out. We've had 679 uses, with the top uses being the reach tool, the brush, and the compressed air. This is a little bit different site. Again, it's a suburban site. However, this was a total remodel of and redesign of their boat launch. And so they have used SOBA standards on how to have a pull-off specifically for cleaning aquatic invasive species, or cleaning your boats to prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species. And what we found is that they have had 435 uses even since September 22nd. So in a time where we're starting to ramp down uses, we're seeing, or just use of the boat ramp in general because it's not summer anymore. We got a ton of uses, and we think that's largely in part to the specific design of the launch. Again, top uses being the grabber, the brush, and the blower. What we found is that in general, the stations are being used. Luckily, we have not had any any of the sites vandalized yet, so that's been fantastic. We found really low operations and maintenance. Our IoT platform also monitors how full the vacuum is, so we can have a Porta-John company come and service that as needed rather than a regular service schedule. So that's really kept down the costs, as well as we have roughly $5 a month for electric costs. I would be remiss if I didn't say a thank you to our nonprofit partners. The Clean Water Land and Legacy amendment through the Outdoor Heritage Fund was a funder of the project. Wildlife Forever has been an ongoing partner. The National Fish and Wildlife Foundation was a funder to the project. We had pilot sponsors at the Three Rivers Park District, St. Louis County, Hennepin County, and the City of Eden Prairie. And then we've received public support through the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. The Minnesota DNR has been a key partner at the Texas Park and Wildlife, and Doug Jensen, who I believe is on this call today at Sea Grant, has been a great resource. So I'll end that with providing my contact information, and feel free to reach out, certainly, if you have any additional questions. And I will turn over the presentation back to everyone else.
Thanks, Pat and Ed. And thanks to everybody who's submitting questions. I'll ask you to just hold on with us a little bit longer so we can have our final presenter provide their presentation, and then we promise to get to those questions. So our final presenter is Erin McFarlane. Since 2007, Erin has worked for the University of Wisconsin Extension Lakes program as the statewide Clean Boats, Clean Waters educator. She supports the Clean Boats, Clean Waters watercraft inspection program and helps coordinate watercraft inspection efforts across the state. So Erin, we should be transferring over to you presenter status and getting you off mute, and then you should be ready to go.
Thanks, Cecilia. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. I really appreciate the chance to talk with you all about Wisconsin's watercraft inspection program today, known as Clean Boats, Clean Waters. It's really a major element of our aquatic invasive species program. It's the most cost-effective prevention and containment tool that we have in the state at this point. So look forward to hearing your questions later after I share some information with you all. I wanted to mention the Wisconsin Lynx partnership before I talk more about our Clean Boats, Clean Waters program. It's thanks to this partnership that our watercraft inspection program exists. This partnership's been around for quite a while. It originated back in the early 1970s. And it was unique when it first started. As you can see from the screen, our members include the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, which kind of represented the science and research aspect. UW Extension was the education and outreach arm, and then we have a citizen advocacy group, Wisconsin Association of Lakes. Now, our partnership has expanded much beyond that now, and we even have our own AIS partnership. But I like to mention this element because it is thanks to this partnership that we were able to get to where we are today. So water is a really valuable resource in a lot of places, and in Wisconsin, it's no exception. We're very fortunate to have many, many lakes. We have many millions of acres of wetlands, just lots of water in general. And all of us are aware of the challenge that can present when we talk about aquatic invasive species today. Just to give you a general idea, we track more than 30 different aquatic invasive species in the state now. Many of the common species for us might be similar to the ones that you're encountering in your states. And it's still our primary goal is to prevent the spread of aquatic invasives and to make sure that we're keeping them to where they're currently at right now. So the story of Wisconsin's Clean Boats, Clean Waters program actually begins with this aquatic plant. And when I'm giving a presentation in person, I like to ask people what plant this is. But since we're talking over webinar today, as you might be able to guess, this is Eurasian water milfoil. And some students, quite young students, middle school students up in northern Wisconsin, noticed that this plant was growing in an odd way and creating a carpet across their lakes and really affecting how people in the area could utilize the lakes. And this was back in 2002. The students were looking for a sort of science project, and when they learned more about the plant and that it was not something that was from Wisconsin and easily spread by people enjoying the lake, they applied for some funding from the Christopher Columbus Foundation, and they were able to create sort of these small educational packets or boxes. They put some aquascopes in there. They wanted to make a brochure about Eurasian water milfoil, and they wanted to be able to tell boaters and anglers and the people enjoying the lake what they could do to make sure they weren't helping spread this plant. And they called themselves the Milfoil Masters, and they caught the attention of quite a few people in the area. Because we have so many lakes in Wisconsin, we also have a lot of lake organizations, lake associations, lake districts. And so the lake groups in their area really loved this idea, and they asked if they could do this at their boat landings. And it eventually caught the attention of the state also. And the Department of Natural Resources adopted the program in 2004 and renamed it Clean Boats, Clean Waters. So we definitely have a grassroots start to our watercraft inspection program. So as it exists now, we've trained several thousand people since the beginning of the program in 2004. Exact numbers are to be determined, and I'll talk about that challenge later. But pretty much what we do is we want to train folks who are living around their lakes, primary groups being members of lake organizations, but we do work with other groups of people. And we want them to be able to take action at their local boat landings to share information about aquatic invasive species with folks, how they're being spread, and also making sure that they help people take some prevention steps. When I joined the program in 2007, this involved me traveling to a lot of different places in the state conducting trainings, and I had a few folks known as AIS coordinators, pretty much AIS staff that were based in counties or regional areas to help conduct these trainings. And things have really changed since then. In the last 10 years, we've had an increase in the number of local staff that we can work with. And so a lot of those folks are conducting the trainings and supporting the inspectors that we have today, too, in addition to myself. And so we do work with a variety of different groups, and I apologize. There we go. We work for a variety of different groups, and I mentioned the lake organizations. That probably makes up the primary group of folks that are out there doing our watercraft inspections, but we do have Department of Natural Resources staff that conduct inspections for us. There's not as many as there used to be back in 2007, so it's still primarily a citizen-based effort, but we also work with some Department of Natural Resources conservation wardens who help enforce the regulations regarding aquatic invasive species in the state, and so they're a huge help to us as well. We work with student interns on Lake Winnebago, one of the really large lakes that we have in Wisconsin. We rely heavily on our UW Oshkosh student interns. They go out, they help conduct inspections and share information with folks who are visiting Lake Winnebago. And we also work with UW Sea Grant in the state on our Great Lakes, on Lake Michigan and Lake Superior. The Great Lakes are very much an area that we would like to see more inspections take place on because we have fewer lake groups working there, and it's definitely they have a high level of aquatic invasives available that could come into Wisconsin. And then fourth, we just have some general community groups that we've conducted trainings and have inspectors who are part of Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, church youth groups, and other groups like that. So again, very much a citizen-based inspection effort. And just to give you an idea of what our inspectors actually do at the landing, again, our primary goal is to help boaters and anglers and people visiting the water understand why we are wanting to take some prevention steps. So in many cases, because our program's been around for quite a while, people are aware of aquatic invasive species, but it's not uncommon for inspectors to talk to people who are just unaware of why we need to make sure we're taking certain steps. We also encourage our inspectors to help folks become active in taking the steps. And then the third part, which I always refer to as the less fun part, but unfortunately very important, is that we also ask our inspectors to collect some data about their efforts. We would like to know how many people they talk to, the boats that are inspected, and we want to pool that data so, again, we know where our efforts are and we can report that information to legislators. And this probably isn't a surprising list of prevention steps to see. In Wisconsin, we word things a little bit differently. Our primary prevention steps are inspect, remove, and drain. So this is what our inspectors emphasize with folks. Our watercraft inspection data sheet that our inspectors use at the boat landing has changed off and on over the years. And for the last 4 or 5 years, it's had some just primarily focused on making sure our inspectors feel comfortable sharing this message and having an interactive conversation with the boaters and anglers. We want to make sure people leave the boat landing understanding why these steps are important and why it would be important for them to take them even when an inspector isn't present. I don't have our watercraft inspection data form on this presentation just because it'd be very difficult to see, but I do have some of the data that we can just generally share with you. Again, those prevention steps that I showed on the previous slide is primarily what makes up our data form, and they are all backed up by aquatic invasive species regulation now. So they are the law that people need to inspect their boats and remove anything they find before entering the water or leaving the landing. And they also can't enter the water with any water in their live wells, so it needs to be drained before they leave the landing or enter the water also. And so our inspectors record information about the people that they talk with. One of the questions that our inspectors ask is, have you been to a different water body in the past 5 days? And if yes, where was it? We just like to collect that information. And recently, I just got an email a couple weeks ago from one of our excellent database folks who work with the database where all of this information goes into. They're saying that they're really working hard on getting a boater traveling pattern online tool. So at least this might help lake groups look at where folks are coming from before they visit their boat landing and where do they go afterwards. So for 2017, we do have some data, but it usually takes people until, the end of the year to enter all of their data. So the numbers that I have to share with you today are from 2016. But, we've been very fortunate to see the number of boats inspected and the number of people contacted and the hours that we spent increase since the beginning of the program. And I get nervous every year because at some point, we're going to see a leveling off. How high can you go? We're not necessarily always increasing the number of inspectors, but we do have some pretty impressive numbers that we're proud of, and we hope to continue to contact a lot of people and see a lot of boats be inspected. And this is just a graph of the change in the number of boats that we've been able to inspect over the years from 2004 until 2016. 2016 saw quite an increase from the year before. And then I have one more graph to share also that just shows some other information that we ask on our Clean Boats, Clean Waters form. We ask folks if it's okay to ask them a few questions when the inspector begins talking to them. And then we also want to know if they've ever spoken to someone wearing the Clean Boats, Clean Waters blue t-shirt before. Have you ever talked to someone like an inspector this year? And so we have some of the numbers that we can share from that. And I think that's interesting to know that we're still the yeses to that question are still outweighing the no's, which is good to know. And I was thinking before this presentation about what has made our Clean Boats, Clean Waters program successful, and that answer might vary depending on who you ask the question of, but I think Joe mentioned earlier that she's seen it's been very helpful to have local partners on board with their inspection program and to communicate with the citizens and the people who are doing the inspections. And we have definitely found that to be true. I think what makes our program work in the state is that we have support from our Aquatic Invasive Species Partnership. It's not just UW Extension or Department of Natural Resources here. It's a multifaceted partnership. We have many, many local partners with counties, tribes. Some are regionally based with nonprofit organizations. And then I mentioned some of our UW partners, like at Oshkosh or with Sea Grant. And without these people's help, I really don't feel like we would be as successful. When I have a citizen call me who's interested in getting involved in Clean Boats, Clean Waters, it is always useful if there's a local partner who knows their county and location even better than I do, since I cover the state. And so I think the ability of these AIS partners to get to know their citizens and maintain those relationships with the lake group and the people in their area over time is really important and what helps the program work well. The other element, and I don't know if we're just lucky in Wisconsin, but we've got some really passionate citizens who continuously want to get active in Clean Boats, Clean Waters. Very rarely do we need to advertise for trainings. In most cases, I get calls from people wanting to make sure to protect their lake from aquatic invasive species, and they want to prevent anything from coming in. Or I have people who are really concerned about having another invasive come in, and they want to make sure to keep what they have in their lake and not share it and not see other things come further. So we're very fortunate to have citizens who year after year are committed to watercraft inspection through Clean Boats, Clean Waters. It also doesn't hurt that we have some grant funding available. It's what supports many of our local partners, our AIS coordinators, and also we have grant funding that can help fund some watercraft inspection programs for our citizen groups. It's not a tremendous amount of money, but it's something that would help them get things started. And again, without the long-term commitment of our larger lakes partnership, I really don't know that our Clean Boats, Clean Waters program would be where it is today. And then, of course, we all have our own sets of issues or challenges. And so we can always talk about more successes and challenges. There's probably some I haven't thought of, but the key ones that come to mind, I'm a real people person. I like working with citizens and our inspectors. And one of the real challenging parts is you also need to collect data about what you're doing. You need to know where the trainings take place, who the participants are, etc. Because we have a variety of different AIS partners and things that conduct our trainings, that can sometimes be challenging to get all of that information and be able to show a really clear, accurate picture of our efforts and how many trainings take place and how many people we have that have been trained in our watercraft inspection process. And then just the element of asking our citizens who are being watercraft inspectors to enter data can sometimes be daunting. I don't think that's unique in Wisconsin. I think asking anyone to use computers or technology and they're not being used to it can pose a problem. But that's just something we're continuing working on, doing a better job of making things easier and run more smoothly and reporting data more accurately. So a benefit of the grant funding that we have that I mentioned in the previous slide can also be a challenge too, because the grants only run for a certain period of time. It often means that we lose staff in certain areas. So we may have a county that a coordinator has built a wonderful relationship with a group of folks, and after a couple years, they're just not there anymore. And so trying to figure out how we can do a better job of filling those gaps and not seeing the loss of some of the local knowledge would be really useful. And even though, like I said, our citizens are fabulous, we always want to know how to make sure that we're retaining people for as long as possible. It's the nature of volunteering that people sometimes get burnout. So we always want to make sure that we're doing a better job of letting folks know they're being appreciated, and then how important their work is. And I'm going to talk more briefly about our decontamination and what's going on with that in Wisconsin. As I said, I primarily work with our watercraft inspection program, and we've focused less on decontamination because of the aspect of liability, how to staff units. It has been complicated. We have had a lot of interest from citizens and various groups. We just haven't figured out how to work through some of the challenges that it faces. But what we do know, the Department of Natural Resources owns 3 portable decontamination units, hot water, high pressure, but primarily they're used for special events, outreach events, things like that. They'll take them to fishing tournaments. So it's not something that used widespread. The Forest Service also owns a few. I am not certain about the number that they have, but we could find that out if people are interested. And we do not have very many landings that have any sort of boat wash facility. So whether it would be cold water or high pressure, we don't have a lot of that yet at our landings. To go along with the decontamination units that the Department of Natural Resources has, however, we definitely have protocol that the Department of Natural Resources staff and anyone associated with the DNR, so their contractors, any agents of the state, it's protocol that they need to follow. You can find the protocol at the link that I shared down there. There's even an online training program that's available too that contractors need to go through. And so if there are any decontamination questions later, I'd be happy to try to answer them. And if I can't, because it's not my specialty, we can definitely find folks who can help you with that. And so with that, I'll wrap my time up until and see what kind of questions everyone has. I just wanted to acknowledge the fact that Paul Skowinski, my coworker, is very creative in carving aquatic invasive species themed pumpkins, and so he let me use his photos. But thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Erin. And that concludes our presentations for today. So we're now going to move on to answering those questions that you've been submitting throughout. And as a reminder, if other questions come up, you can continue to use the chat box to submit those. So if I could ask all of our speakers to unmute themselves, we have questions for all of you. But we're going to start back at the beginning with Brittany. And so, Brittany, are you back with us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect.
So our first question for you is how many inspections were completed last year and how many decontaminations?
Yeah, so for 2016, there were over 120,000 inspections around the state, and that we believe reached over 140,000 people. I think that our 2017-2018 data will be more accurate on those exact numbers as we continue to include other programs in this Survey 123 pilot program that's been going on. For the decontaminations, I don't have exact numbers for those, but I know that the Lake George Commission, our mandatory program for Lake George, they did 1,900 decontaminations, but then also Adirondack Watershed Institute did over 1,000. And so there's other units around the state that isn't just included in those. But.
Thanks. And we have one more question for you, and that is, how were you able to implement legal mandatory inspections of watercraft?
Yeah, so most of the programs around the state are voluntary, but the Lake George Park Commission that I highlighted is mandatory. And so they actually went under, I think, a 2-year program where they studied ideas and alternatives for prevention of invasive species. And it was a very public process, including dozens of meetings in the public. I know that they ended up voting on the prevention method for mandatory programs, and they went through a pilot program, and it was put into effect, and that's, I think, been going on since either 2013 or maybe 2014 at the latest. If someone's interested in more information on that, though, the website, I believe, is lgboatinspections.com, or if you search Lake George Park Commission boat inspections, you should get the results for that.
Thanks, Brittany. And I'll also mention that we had somebody from Lake George on the webinar we held back in July. So I would encourage people, if they weren't able to view that webinar, to go back and take a look at that as well. Our next set of questions are for Joe. Joe, are you back off mute?
I am now.
Thank you. So over the 4 years and 1,200 boats, what maintenance has had to go into the mobile wash systems?
We've been really happy with these systems in that the maintenance has been really low. Oil changes, changing out the filters that we use for recovery of the wash water, but that's just your everyday maintenance, you know, tightening the hubs, that kind of thing. So they've been really low maintenance, knock on wood. We've been really happy with them. I would say maybe a couple of leaky gaskets that we've had to replace, but overall the mechanics have been really low maintenance for us. I mean, honestly, the number of hours that the machines are running are pretty low every year compared to someone who owns a pressure washing business.
Thanks. And then the next question is, are you aware of any insurance companies that are prepared to cover the potential liability of decontamination procedures?
Nope.
So our next question is, do the permanent wash stations supply high pressure and hot water like the mobile wash station?
The permanent stations we have here in Michigan, some of them are just high pressure with no heat. Some of them do have heat. So it varies per the design of each individual site. They've all been developed pretty independently.
And I have two more questions for you, Joe. How would you weigh the impact of the earned media versus the actual number of watercraft decontaminated? And have you tracked your earned media and perhaps the placement rate for the events?
Great question. The earned media, I would say, is greater than the impact from the actual boat washing demonstrations. We get a lot of input from people who have heard about our program or have seen it remotely, either through the media or have heard about it, versus the actual value of the washing of an individual boat. And so I would say that the earned media beyond actual doing a single boat wash is much greater. And so while we love to choose to do events where we know we'll get good media coverage, we also don't turn away interested community partners who want to work with us. The one thing that we use to sometimes weed out a request is if the boat launch is simply too small, such that if we set up our equipment, we may actually impede people's access to the launch because there's just not enough room to get boats in and out. And we've had a couple cases where we didn't know that was going to happen. We showed up and we realized there was really no room for the unit. That's been a bigger determinant of where we don't go.
So this next question relates to, I think, what you just touched on about the impact of the media. So the next question is, you mentioned that you're sometimes in a situation of washing very few boats in a day. So how do you address the cost benefit of low rates of boat washing? And do you try to target busier boat launches?
If we get, competing requests on the same day from a place we know we're going to get a lot of traffic and a place that we don't, sure, we're gonna take the busy launch first. But there's also a problem on the other side. If the launch is super busy, we don't want to slow down people's process of getting in and out of the lake. We want to avoid the perception that we are a nuisance or an unwanted feature at a boat access site. So while we do events over the 4th of July weekend, for example, in those cases, we won't choose the busiest place just because we don't want to be in a place where people are upset that we're there and irritated with us. But yeah, certainly it happens where we'll spend a lot of big expense, time and money to get and wash very few boats. Sometimes that's weather, sometimes that's other features though. And so at this point we have the capacity to do it. So we want to collaborate with as many local partners as we can, regardless of how busy that launch might be that day.
Thanks. So I'm going to move on to a couple of questions for Ed and Pat, but Joe and Brittany, hang on because we have a set of questions we're going to pose to the group at the end. So don't leave us yet. So this question is for Ed and Pat. How does the cost of the Geofence advertising compare to some of your more traditional advertising methods? And where does the advertisement pop up? Where does it come up, on a Google ad, YouTube, or web browser? How does that work?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Good question. The cost for geofencing ads is usually around $15 per 1,000 impressions. And it works by using a software database called the COM1000, where the technology pulls and serves ads based on an algorithm for some of the top 1,000 websites in the country. And so that list varies by participation, but it typically, could include weather.com, cabela's.com, walmart.com, some of those really high-profile websites that folks use. And they have to be on that website or a particular app. I believe it's also app-driven, so they have to be on that site. And once they enter that geographical boundary that you pre-set up, then they're served that pop-up ad. So there's a variety of ways they could get there. Another really neat thing that's coming online is advertising through streaming. More and more people are ditching cable TV, network TV, and streaming via like Netflix and some of the other services. So we're also working with agencies to identify how to better target our demographic and users using streaming, which is also highly targeted by zip code, age demographic. So there's a variety of tools that we can help deliver that message.
Thanks, Pat. And one more question for both of you. Can you tell us about the costs associated with the wash stations?
Sure. All said and done with delivery, the pad, electrical hookup, and then the technology costs are installed and delivered about $25,000.
Thanks. So I'm going to switch over to Erin here briefly. We have a question for you. Could you clarify what you meant when you said agents of the state in your presentation?
Sure, it just means anyone representing the state or funded by the state.
Thanks.
Yep.
And then we have a series of questions here that will open it up to the group. So just feel free to jump in if you have an answer you'd like to contribute. And we're a little bit over time, so I also want to mention that some of the questions that were asked were already answered by our speakers within the chat box. So if you don't hear a question, we would encourage you to go back and review that chat box because it may have already been answered there. So thank you for that. So the first question for all the speakers, how do the mobile boat wash units clean, decontaminate the inside of a motor, for example, the water pumps or propeller, where water is used to cool the boat motor?
This is Joe. We do, on our mobile boat wash units in Michigan, we have attachments for actually going inside of motors to spray them down, to attach to live well outlets and spray them down and so forth. However, we avoid using them because of concern for liability. There's a higher chance of us causing damage to that those people's equipment by using those attachments, and so we've chosen, because we're out there for demonstration purposes, to not use those. But we certainly talk to people about how they can do it themselves.
And this is Ed with CD3, we offer a educational platform, which is stopais.com, which walks users specifically how to take actions themselves, whether it be the impeller cleaning out or the best management practices for lowering your engine, and we do our best to cover it with education and then the tools. And I'll throw the website up on the chat.
This is Brittany. So some of the programs do actually flush the actual engines and motors. However, not all of the programs do that and actually connect up to it, again, for the same reasons as Joe, for liability and concerns.
Thanks. And we had a related question about the live wells in fishing boats. So if you have any additional to add about the live wells, we have folks who would be interested in hearing that as well.
This is Ed. We encourage people to suck out the live wells with our vacuum and then blow dry them with the air compressor, and that's including the line.
This is Brittany. So to speak on live wells in New York, it's actually mandatory for people to clean out their live wells and drain their live wells in the state before they leave the launches. And so part of that, if there is a decontamination unit at the launch, they can rinse it out for the boats. However, a lot of people have been towel drying, making sure they're draining it fully and towel drying instead if there's no units there.
Thanks. And so our next question for the decontamination standards, decontamination stations, one of our attendees wanted to know if there were any common standards for those stations.
I can start off with that one. And so because we have so many different programs around the state, each of our programs have a different approach to it. So the mandatory program at Lake George, if they consider your boat dirty, you have to get the decontamination, otherwise they don't get the seal. For Adirondack Watershed Institute, I know some of their stations are located on the side of the highway, and so they have signs out that just say free boat wash, and so that really targets a lot of people driving up through, and they'll stop to do that and then get the educational information as well. But then some of the other voluntary efforts, they can suggest a decontamination with the high pressure and or hot water, but as being voluntary, the people don't actually have to follow through with that. And so I think that if somebody is interested in more of the standards and more information about specific programs, again, that algaeboatinspections.com, but then also the Adirondack Watershed Institute has a site, and it's adkwatershed.org, and I can put both of those links into the chat box.
As far as self-decontamination is concerned, what we used we developed our tool and our educational platform was based on the state of Utah. They have a self-decontamination protocol and that they have put out, and as well as with in conjunction with the Minnesota DNR and the state of Texas, from cleaning, draining, and drying steps, what folks would like to see. But I don't think there's necessarily a standard.
All right, thank you both. Our next question, and we're just going to take two more, and then we're going to wrap up because we're about 10 minutes longer than we said we would be. So we'll take two more questions, and then we'll encourage folks to follow up with the speakers directly if you have additional questions. So our next one is, And this is for, I think, any of our speakers in your state. Could mandatory boat inspections be done in your state? And I would just open it up if you have any perspectives on that, and recognize that you may not be the right people to answer that question.
Cecilia, this is Erin.
Go ahead, Erin.
I guess they could be done in Wisconsin if we had citizens who were interested in seeing that happen and wanted to lobby for that and have rules that required that occur. I don't know that we're close to that in the slightest, in my opinion, but that's what I know for us from our standpoint.
This is Joe in Michigan, and I would echo what Erin said. In Michigan, there doesn't, although we do get some individuals asking, why don't we have mandatory inspections in Michigan? By and large, I think there's not the political will for that right now, and I'm not sure if that'll change. Maybe it will with continued outreach about the importance of these kind of activities.
I also agree with that. And so we do have the Lake George mandatory program, which is just for Lake George. And so they mimicked the Lake Tahoe program. And I think that for all of us, the voluntary programs have been very successful in reaching people. And sometimes becoming mandatory can cause concern for the public, and they get higher concerns of what is happening and what the messages are that they're getting. So I think that it is possible. It's just the amount of effort that goes into it. So.
And we do have a comment that was submitted in follow-up to this question that currently Wisconsin does not have the legislative authority to require decontamination. So thank you, Bob Wakeman, for providing that additional comment. We have one last question, like I said, and then we're going to wrap up today, but would encourage you to reach out to speakers directly. Our last question is, if you don't have 140-degree water, is bleach or vinegar a better decontaminant, and in particular for zebra mussels?
This is Ed. When it comes to zebra mussels, it's a Belger versus adult question. So adults are most often moved on things like plants and vegetation and things that fall into your boat if you're a day user. Obviously, that's not the case if the boat's been sitting in the water. If it's been sitting in the water and it's crusted, you're looking at dry docking or doing the hot water decon. I can't think of a solution that's going to address that. Obviously, with bleach, you're going to have issues because it's toxic and using it by the water body. Vinegar has been suggested, but I'm not sure if the efficacy of that truly has been tested. There's some different folks looking at organic acids as a solution or in solution to address that issue, but in using things like citric acid, but I don't know any other options.
Hi, Cecilia and everyone. This is Erin again. Wisconsin put together a really great document that outlines the different aquatic invasives that we deal with, and then based on research and findings in scientific papers, what different types of disinfection techniques are best and most effective for those. I don't know if Bob has that document hidden somewhere. It is linked on the disinfection page, but I'm having trouble accessing it. But if you guys want to be patient and then revisit the Wisconsin's disinfection and decontamination page, I would bet we would have it linked soon, if that helps.
Erin, we also have that Wisconsin guide linked to from the Invasive Mussel Collaborative website. So there is a link if they go to the decontamination page on the Mussel Collaborative website to your Wisconsin guide. And we've also put together a summary document on the Mussel Collaborative website of different decontamination methods and their effectiveness.
Perfect. Thank you.
So with that, I'd like to thank everybody who participated in the webinar today. As a reminder, we will post the recording on the Mussel Collaborative website in the next couple of days. If you have follow-up questions or comments, you can direct them to us at the Great Lakes Commission, or you can contact one of our speakers directly. In addition, we will, after we hang up the line, we will leave the Skype window open for a little bit if you need to scroll back through that chat box to look for specific information or those links that were added. We will leave that up for a little bit after we close the line here, and we'll also copy those links and put them on with where the recording is posted on the Mussel Collaborative website. So we'll link to all those resources from the website as well. And I think we just have one more thing. Brittany, if you're still with us, I believe for those attendees who are very interested in this topic, New York is going to be hosting a webinar series, and Brittany, you were just going to mention that briefly before we wrap up today.
Yeah, thank you so much. So New York Sea Grant is hosting a webinar series about watercraft inspection programming, which is very relatable to New York, but if anybody else is interested, you are more than welcome to join us. So we're talking about there's 4 weeks straight. There's the first 3 Thursdays and then a Friday. And so the topics vary from New York State regulations and legislation to some conversations more in depth about programs that I actually did not mention today. And then also we have research being presented about a New York State modeling approach to predicting aquatic invasions in the Adirondacks. And so if you are interested in that, the registration is open, and I'll just post the link right in the chat box, and it's NYSEAGRANT, NewYorkSeaGrant.org/watercraft-inspection. And thank you again for the opportunity to present today and to announce the webinar series.
Thank you, and thanks once again to all of our speakers. We very much enjoyed your presentation and appreciate your time. And with that, we will end the webinar for today. Thank you.